Hey everybody, today I'm taking you behind the scenes and I'm going to show you my family's nursery's process for getting our plants for next season. So every single greenhouse and nursery has a different method and different techniques for getting this job done. But the one thing we all have in common is that these orders have to go in way before we'd like them to. I think if you ask any of us, we'd say, can't we just do this in the winter time when it's quiet and we're kind of trapped in the house and we don't have all these outside jobs to do? But ultimately, we've got to get them in now because all of our growers will be basically growing our plants while we're in for the winter. So we got to get them in. And the process can be a little daunting, but it does start with the fun part, and that's with all the catalogs arriving. So this is still an industry where color catalogs are very, very popular, and they're very, very beautiful. And it's so nice to be able to have like all of these catalogs that we're able to put out. And just to give you an idea, this is the stack of catalogs for the companies that we'll be ordering annuals from. So that's kind of a big stack. And this is the stack of catalogs from the companies that we'll be ordering perennials from. I don't have the catalogs out for the shrubs and trees because that's its own beast. And then this stack here is the price sheets for all these companies. So it's just spreadsheet upon spreadsheet of how much each one costs. So a lot of these companies will carry some of the same varieties. So pricing them out and deciding, who we get what from can really save us a huge amount of money if we purchase the right things from the right people. Cheapest is not always best, though. There are some companies that we find are really good with certain plants. So we get all of our geraniums from one company, our begonias from someplace. We just find that they just grow them best for us. So it can be a bit of a process just deciding who we're going to get that stuff from. So after we've had time to dream about all the new varieties that we're going to be carrying, we need to get down to business. And that starts with a special spreadsheet that we've created. And this is our own document that we put every single plant that we carried last year. So I organize them by annuals, perennials, trees, shrubs. And so I only work in one category at a time because I'd lose my mind if I went beyond that. So with annuals, we put down every single annual that we had last year. And the first thing we do is we decide what's getting cut. And there are loads of reasons why we cut plants. A lot of times, maybe a plant didn't perform as well as we wanted to. There also are some plants that maybe we just weren't real good at growing, because sometimes it's not a plant problem, it's a people problem. And we're the ones to blame, so we have to keep that in consideration. And then other times there's just new varieties that are coming in and we need to make room for them because we only have so much room on our benches. So we can't just get everything. I think if we could, we would probably get at least 90% of all the plants in these catalogs. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Not even an option. So we need to be very, very strategic in what we're purchasing and how we organize things and how we kind of distribute what we're going to get. So once we decide what we're cutting, then there's also the list of things that are definitely staying. They will not get cut. They're safe. And then everything else is kind of in between. We've got to just look at all the new varieties and kind of play with it. We also go through and decide like, hey, we had a lot of this type of plant left over. So maybe it's red geraniums or something. So we need to pull back this year on red geraniums. Or we ran out of yellow calibrachoa early last year. So we need to make sure that we up those numbers. So that means we're going to have to make it up somewhere else because we're not necessarily going to, just add more calibrachoa. We probably will take it from one of those that, we had a lot of purple left over. So we're going to just, swap out the purple and the yellow. So it's a technical thing and it can be a little bit annoying and a little bit frustrating and a little daunting, but we usually figure it out pretty efficiently. But the hardest thing really is trying to narrow down which new varieties we're going to carry because, we look at these catalogs, I go to the trial gardens and I get to see them in action. I really do want all of them and I want to be able to offer them to everybody. But because that's not an option, we have another little method that we use. And what I like to do, because everybody in my family are definitely visual thinkers, I actually make a little catalog. And this eventually becomes an actual downloadable catalog that we offer to our customers, kind of a preview catalog, so they can see what we're going to be carrying. And this makes all the difference because, there's some varieties where there's like 2 plants in it. So that we don't necessarily need to have the visual. But when it comes to things like calibrachoa, I like to go and put them in, or arrange them by color. So I've got my yellow and orange, I've got my purple and pink, and then, there's just a page for all these different types of colors that are in there. And on this sheet, I put all the varieties that we had, and then I also put all the varieties, the new varieties that we'd like to have. And literally we go through and X out the ones we're not going to have, and then just kind of narrow it down. It's important that we do this because it's very easy for us to see new varieties. And let's say there's like 4 new pink calibrachoas that we're just really excited about. We can't add more 4 more pinks to our lineup. It's just going to bloat the pink department way too much. And so then we've either got to, only choose 1 or 2 of those varieties, or we've got to sacrifice something that we carried before. So it becomes a bit of a dance, and it's a big conversation between like me, my sister, my mom. We'll run it by my dad and any other staff members as well. There's certain times that we know certain people might have better instinct on what to keep and what to cut. And eventually we just have to make the call. So when a plant gets cut, the first thing I do is go to the spreadsheet, and I have a column that's my plus and minus column. So if something is subtracted, I put how many we subtracted. So let's say we had 50 of this particular plant and we're dropping it. So I'm going to put a minus 50 in that column. And then I'm also going to make sure that I change the number to 0 for our quantity that we're getting. And then I highlight it in red because that basically at a glance, I can really see all the ones that we're cutting. If I add a plant, I do something similar. I add a line and then put the name of the plant, put how many we're getting, and then let's say we're getting 50, I put plus 50 in that plus minus column, and I highlight it in blue. So blue means new, red means you're out of here. And then if there's certain varieties that we're changing the quantity of, so like I said, if we're upping the yellows but downing the blues, so the yellows will get their extra 50 and I turn it to a gold color. And if I'm dropping down on the purples, then they also get a gold color, but it's going down instead. So gold means change. So there's been a change. So it's not a new plant. It's not something we're cutting. It's just something that we're making a change to. And I found that's a really good way for me to be able to keep track of any changes that I'm making. So I can look at my, coleus category, and with the plus and minus, I know if I need to add 50 more coleus or 150 more coleus, or if I'm over in coleus. It helps me just keep a running tally of that category. Also, it lets me look at my entire list, because ultimately I have a certain number that I have to be under, or else I'm going to be, basically taking up too much bench space. So it lets me know where I'm at for the whole time as we're going through. It also gives me a little ammunition if someone's really, really hell-bent on a plant that they want to add. I kind of have to say, okay, we're over. So either we need to drop something, or we need to find more bench space for it, or we need to find more hanging basket space, whatever it is. So it just becomes a really good conversation point, and it's based on data versus our emotions, because there is nothing worse than basically making your list based on emotions, because it ends up, you end up skipping whole categories because it's not your favorite plant, or you just, it wasn't front of mind. So we try to be as strategic and technical as we can with this, even though picking flower colors really is kind of an emotional choice. We just fall in love with plants, so you can't help it. Otherwise, the other thing about a lot of these plants that people might not realize is that most of these companies go through brokers. And so we have a rep, and that rep, like when I look at this, we have a rep that reps for basically these 4 companies. Actually, they have more than this. So I'm able to give them the order for all 4 of these companies. I do give them to him separately because he has to enter them in separately. We get charged separately, but we're charged from our broker. So our broker handles all the billing. That means the plant companies can focus on plants, and the broker focuses on basically billing and getting us our orders in. The good thing is that we've been in business long enough that we can also, like if I need to make a change with one of my orders, like with this company, I can contact them directly and just say, hey, what do you have left in this and that? And, try to make the changes that I need to. Companies like newer companies, or companies that they maybe haven't worked with, they probably won't do that with them, because the broker is going to say, no, it needs to go through us, because we're going to do the billing, and they already owe us, $40,000, and we can't let them up that number. It happens. And so that's one thing that we're lucky. We've always paid our bills, so they've always been really good about letting us talk directly to the plant growers. It does make a difference. Now, anybody can call the plant grower, but the plant grower might not be able to add to the order without going through the broker. So it's just something that with some of these companies, it works. Some companies will never talk to us. And then there are a couple companies like this one, and I think there's another one in the perennials, that we contact that company directly. So they have their own reps, and they don't rep other companies. So that means that we can't go through our broker, and we can only order them through like our designated salesperson. Whereas for some of these other companies, there's probably 15 different brokerages that I could go through to order from them. But it also means that each broker has their own price sheet. It gets a little complicated, but in the end, it's not too bad. Like, it is nice being able to just send everything to my one broker. Also, like, our broker is really good about certain plants where he'll often tell us like, hey, you know, I had a couple people who had that plant last year and they said it was really hard to grow if you don't have sun, or if it's really bad about this or that. And they found that this other variety is a little better. So they are not like married to one company. So they're not always going to try to just sell you from that one company. They'll say like, hey, you know, there's something better over there, especially if they know that we're ordering from multiple companies. Because I'll say, hey, should I order from A or B? And he'll say, look, this one has the better reputation for those plants. You know, we get to know that information. At least a good broker is able to do that. Not all brokers, I think, are that great with that, but we're lucky we have a good broker. And then there's also, you know, different things that come into play. So like when we deal with proven winners, we have to make sure that when we order, we also tell them how many pots we need, because they have a pot requirement. So we have to make sure that we're using a proven winners pot. So we have hundreds of proven winner pots. We store them upstairs. So we don't usually have to order that many of them, but every year there's always at least a couple cases that we need to get from them. And the interesting thing too is like the broker who also handles these plants, they'll also do all the hard goods. You know, they rep companies that have the plastics, that have the yard art, that have the pots and the hanging baskets. So the broker can be a really knowledgeable person, especially if you have somebody with a lot of experience. So we do a lot with our brokers, and we have multiple brokers. I should also add that. So we have one primary one for plants, but we have for a lot of the hard goods, we have a couple other brokers as well, and they could sell the plants to us too for some of them. So it's kind of one of those funny industries where when I first started doing orders, I was like, wait, who do I talk to for what? I don't quite get it. This is confusing. Wait, so I have to get my hanging baskets here and my whatever here, and that's how it works. But the good thing is I can also call a broker and say, look, I've got this kind of plastic container that I need. Who do I get it from? And they'll be able to do that research for me. So what else should I tell you? I mean, when it comes down to, I could tell you some of the plants that we are definitely cutting this year. I'll just tell you the kind of highlighty ones. We have decided to pull back on Angelonia, and it's not because we don't love Angelonia. It's in part because Angelonia is a little bit slower up here because we are above the 45th parallel, so we don't get the sunlight. You know, we're just a couple minutes less sunlight, but it's amazing how that can be different for us. It just doesn't get up to size quite as fast, although our Angelonias look pretty good the last couple of years, but people up here don't usually buy it that often. It's not as a familiar plant. We keep trying to introduce people to it, but it hasn't taken. So we still are going to carry Angelonia, but we're not going to have, I think we had like 7 colors last year, and I think we're going to just do our 3 main colors that are always the best sellers for us next year. I'm kind of bummed about that, but at the same time, this is going to allow us to have more bench space for some other plants. So it works. I mean, we've got to put out there what's going to sell. We'll be making some changes up to our dahlia selection, but we do that every year because we like to have something new and different. So that's nothing new. We're not going to do, we've done the Sweet Talk series of Kufia, and that's very similar to the Totally Tempted series from Proven Winners. And the only reason why we're not going to do it is because they're plants that they're really beautiful and they're really quite nice, but they do look bad if they don't get watered. So they die back. They sprout back up. So they're drought tolerant, but they'll look bad for a little while. They weren't super popular. So we just kind of decided the other type of Kufia tends to do a lot better. Like the Vermillionaire, the Hummingbird's Lunch, a couple of the other ones like Sugar Bells, all those tend to sell really much better. And the hummingbirds like those a lot more. So that's another change. Who else is getting the cut? We're probably going to make a switch to our Helianthus. That's the branching sunflower. For 2 years, we carried the Soul Seeker Golden Nectar. I really love that plant, but it kind of seemed a little bit smaller last year, and it might have been just our conditions. It could have been us, but there's a really nice one called Sunfinity Red Yellow Bicolor, and I really liked it. It's very similar. I thought, let's go with that one. And we're also carrying the Sunfinity Double Yellow, so having 2 Sunfinities, sometimes it's nice to have kind of plants from the same series just because it just makes it easier for us when we're talking about stuff. We're not going to do any of the Solar Tower Ipomia or sweet potato vine. I love that stuff. There's also the something from Proven Winners. That one, they're fantastic. They grow up, they grow down, they're super vigorous, but they're so vigorous that they're hard to keep on the bench. And people actually seem to prefer like a less vigorous type of sweet potato vine. People are very used to sweet potato vine just taking over at a certain point in the summer. So we're going to pull back on that. We've had them for the last couple of years, and they're just a harder sell for us. So we're going to pop those out. Who else is in there? We're going to be making some changes to the coleus, but only because there's new kinds that we really love. Last year, we put a big emphasis on getting more pinks in there, and that was a good choice because people do tend to be drawn to the coleus with the pinks, and there's even more this year. So, well, how am I going to make that decision? I'm not sure yet. Lantana, there's just new varieties. So we're making some switches, and there's certain colors that we're going to have more of. I mean, we're changing up some of the petunias, but that's only, you know, to accommodate some of the new ones. We're not going to do the unplugged red salvia. I don't know, it just kind of was ho-hum. So we're going to actually just do one of the other types. I think we're going to do one called Saucy Red or something like that, which has been one that, it's similar to one that we've carried before. So I think that one's going to be a nice one. I hate to say this, but we're also going to be cutting Terrenia. It just is one of those plants that hasn't been a big seller for us. I don't think enough people know about it. It's great because it's good for shade, but one downfall is that it's not always in flower, and maybe we're just not good at getting it to flower. I'm not sure, but you know, we have it in our kind of semi-shade area. It still gets a decent amount of sunlight, and it usually starts flowering like June 5th or something like that. And most of our customers are buying their plants usually at the end of May. And so it kind of comes on a little too late. And even then it's not super showy. So it's a harder one. And then I mean, those are the main ones, but like you can see my little technique for trying to pick coleus. Like I'm like, okay, these are the definitely yes ones, but we still have to decide what we're going to do about these other ones. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. I have to say that, but it's fun work. This is like the fun part of the job, is being able to pick these plants. It's just trying to anticipate what the customers are going to want and what's going to sell well and what's going to make people really happy and what's going to grow well. So a lot to think about, but it is a fun part of the business. So I just wanted to show you guys what we're doing. We're going to have all these in probably by next week. Perennials, not all of them, because we have one company that hasn't even gotten us their catalog yet, which they need to get their act together, because we want to get this stuff done and in. There are, like, if there are certain varieties that we want, I've already gotten some of those in, like new varieties that come in, like some of the Walter's Gardens ones. Back in May, I had gotten those into Walters. And there's also like bulb orders for certain things. A lot of times you have to get those in the spring in order to get those. So it depends on what you're working on. We don't carry bulbs, so it's not such a big deal, but it's bit of a process. And I do also need to make sure, especially with perennials, that I go through everybody's lists, because every single person with their hand on the ordering gives me a list of their wish list, and then we have to kind of have a discussion. So I try to organize it and then come back with questions for them, like, is this better than this one? Or if we had A or B, you know. So I'm the mediator on all this stuff. So I get to be the bad guy too, because ultimately I can say, like, I really don't recommend this. But one thing with my family that's kind of interesting is if someone really feels strongly about something, usually all of us in the family will say, okay, we're going to try it this year and we'll see how it goes. So that does give us the opportunity to try a lot of new plants. And we are kind of a place that is known for carrying a lot of different varieties. We have a really diverse kind of selection of plants compared to a lot of places. So it kind of makes us an interesting place to shop. And part of that is because we're willing to try new stuff, even if it's stuff that, you know, maybe we don't know how it's going to do exactly, but we do our homework and we try to pick the best varieties for everybody. So there you have it. And we're not the only ones who go through this much trouble trying to pick the right plants for you guys. Every single nursery and greenhouse is doing this right now. Also reminds me that if there is a plant that you are dreaming of, something maybe you saw in one of my trial garden videos that you absolutely want, you probably should let your local greenhouse or nursery know about it now. They might not be able to order it. They might not be ordering from a company that provides that plant, but at least they can check, or they can recommend an alternative. So keep that in mind. Keep in touch with them. Like, now is the time, because if you call them in January, they're probably not going to be able to get that plant. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you all very soon. I've got lots more videos coming, but this one here, this is kind of where my work is right now.